everyone, this is Payana and welcome to my book club. And today's book is the 6th book in the Temeraire series, Tongues of Serpents. I'm not gonna give you a summary in this one because it's been 6 books, and I'm just gonna link to all the other videos I've made about this series. All you need to know is Temeraire is a dragon, Laurence is his master or partner, I guess, and Laurence is a human being, and this is set during the Napoleonic Wars. Laurence has been condemned for treason and has been sent to Australia to a prison camp along with Temeraire, and his role is to also install dragons onto the Australian soil, because this is currently the only part of the world which doesn't have an indigenous dragon population. So the book starts with Laurence and his men being involved in a barroom brawl in Sydney. So at this point in time, Sydney is not the huge metropolitan city it is today. It is just a tiny little settlement made up of crates and a few rickety houses. And the people who live there are not disciplined. They don't have any form of order. They have all basically gone rogue. And obviously Laurence isn't appreciated in this part of the world because they all know that he's a traitor. They all know why he's been sent to Australia. And he is separated from Temeraire at this point, and Temeraire is waiting for him outside of the city with Iskierka, who's also waiting for her captain. And they both talk about running through the city to try and find their captains, and then decide not to do that because Iskierka can breathe fire and she'll just burn the whole place down. And they're already viewed pretty negatively, the dragon people. So there are 2 dragons, Temeraire and Iskierka, and 3 eggs that are due to hatch. Interestingly, we get to see a character from the first novel who was a dragon captain in the Aerial Corps, but he was very, disliked by the other captains because of the way he treated his dragon. He neglected his dragon, didn't take care of him at all, and basically abused him until the poor creature, Levitas, ended up dying, and Laurence had to force him, wrestle him over to his dying dragon so that he could spend the dragon's last moments with him. So when it's announced that this man is going to come, and he turns up and he's come to claim one of the eggs because his dragon's dead, and he's also a member of the nobility, quite a powerful family, he is sent to Australia to keep him out of the way, but nonetheless he is given a dragon. And it's quite amusing because the dragon he's given is quite strong-willed, not like Levitas at all. He is the complete opposite of Levitas in the sense that he is just very, very, very demanding, and this captain actually spends quite a lot of time with him, to everyone's great surprise, and he does kind of behave like a prick, but I thought less so than in the first novel. He kind of redeems himself in a way, even though he's still a pretty horrible character. So that was interesting. And so later on, Laurence is approached by quite a powerful man in Sydney, who's having a lot of issues with trade because of a smuggling operation that is going on. And Laurence is asked, because, him and his people have dragons, they can fly long distances and try and figure out what routes the smugglers are using and what's going on. Okay. So Laurence agrees to this, and he flies off with Temeraire and Iskierka and the newly hatched dragon, and also the 2 eggs, and try and find out where these smugglers are coming from. And I really love this side of the novel because it is insanely confusing, because at first they think that these smugglers might be ex-convicts, they might be British people, they think that they have come from the west. And so they start following this trail and end up discovering that these smugglers are not, in fact, Westerners. They are native Australian Aboriginals. So that was a big surprise. And so a lot of the novel is dedicated to that, to looking through all the abandoned, empty areas of Australia, which wasn't populated back then, apart from the Aboriginal tribes, of which there weren't that many, and just trying to find what's going on with this smuggling ring. And it gets to the point where one of the eggs gets stolen, and the second egg hatches, like the second egg, the last remaining egg hatches into this rather frail, skinny, tiny little dragon, and there are a group of people there who have been promised this dragon and they don't want it. So the dragon ends up going to one of Laurence's crew, a South African boy who he picked up when they were in South Africa in book 4, I think, Empire of Ivory, book 4. And later on, this dragon grows into this rather extraordinary creature, and the dragon doctor says, I think it's going to be a heavyweight. I think this is going to be a big boy, because they don't really, these eggs are the kind of the ones left over from the British eggs. And at which point, the other captains try and win over this dragon, even though they didn't want it in the first place, and even talked about putting it down. So that was quite an amusing subplot. And eventually they do find the smugglers who are working with this insanely massive dragon, so big it can cross the sea to China. And they even have this, this big smuggling operation going on. The Chinamen and the Aboriginal people have set up this operation, and they bring in silks from China, they bring in china plates and cutlery and fruit and all kinds of things. And the way they do this is they have this insanely massive dragon that flies across the sea, but they also do this with sea serpents who go under the sea with all these chests attached to them, and then they just come up at the other end and are fed a load of tuna. And it's brilliant. I love the way Naomi Novik is utilising, really trying to think of all the possible ways of utilising the dragons in this scenario, and now using them to create this trade between China and Aboriginal Australia is extraordinary. I really love that. A really brilliant idea, but sadly, the British don't think so. The British rule the sea, they can't have this going on, and they essentially declare war on this port in Australia, this smuggling port, which isn't actually a smuggling port, it's actually a trading port. I'm quite curious to see what happens after this, because obviously this is alternative history, but it's also, obviously it mirrors real events, and this was the time when Britain actually went to war with China over the Opium Wars, when that round about that time, I think it was the early 1800s, if I'm not mistaken. So there were real life trading wars between Britain and China back at this period. However, they didn't go that well for China, because Britain had an insane naval fleet, sent a few ships over there, and the Chinese had no way of fighting against the British Navy. So they were all hammered. But in this book, it is interesting just the advantage the Chinese have, and especially what has been panning out all over this series, because in book 2, Throne of Jade, when the Emperor's brother died, he was a very conservative man. He wanted to keep China a very secretive country, very closed country, but his death is now allowing a lot of people to go out there and indulge in the trade, the international trade that they wanted to do in the first place, which China did back in the day. they didn't import a lot, but they did export quite a lot. Britain bought a lot of tea. A lot of tea came from China. So now they have this advantage, like having these sea serpents, because the sea serpents they're not only used to ferry goods across the sea, they're also used to attack ships. When the ships arrive and try and attack this port, they put a load of rotten fish onto the ships, and that's the message to the sea serpents that they have to attack the ships. So they all come up and wind themselves around the ships. There's this big battle, and the British forces have to back down and accept that China's going to have trade with Aboriginal Australians, and that's how it's going to be from now on. So, at the end of this, there is an overwhelming feeling of everyone's just had enough. The settlers in Australia have had enough of being told what to do by the king. They want independence, essentially, and Laurence is offered a position of power in Australia, which he turns down because he has also just had enough of doing what other people want him to do, essentially, and he wants to go his own way. And the other interesting thing at the end of this book, Napoleon, who's still waging war against everyone, has gone to invade Brazil. Yeah. And he did this by using the African dragons and the African people who, in book 4, freed all the slaves from the slave ports in Africa and apparently started traveling to Europe in order to save their people who had been sold into slavery. And Napoleon decides to utilize this and say, hey, you know where all the slaves are being sent? America. So they're only too happy to fly across the Atlantic and go and attack Rio. And so it is heavily hinted at the end of this book that book 6 is going to take place in South America. And they also meet an American man who works in trade, and apparently they use dragons a lot in trading in North America, and the Native American people breed these Mayan dragons, which they use a lot in import and export. So I'm actually quite excited about book 7. I didn't like this one as much as the others. I did enjoy it a lot, but it lacked something. In my opinion, there was some kind of magic missing from it that all the previous 5 books had. But it did have some really good elements to it. And once again, Naomi Novik managed to make an incredibly long journey through the deserts of Australia where there is not a lot of potential for stuff happening. And she makes a lot of stuff happen. And there are even these creatures, they're not dragons, but they are kind of lizard-like creatures, these incredibly good ambush predators, which they have to learn how to cope with because, and this builds up, this is brilliantly built up over quite a big period of this novel. So, once again, brilliant writing, brilliant storytelling, brilliant imagination. There was just some spark of something lacking. I did kind of get that spark when they eventually, like the first time they catch a glimpse of the insanely huge dragon that can fly across the ocean. But it kind of melted away, and this happens towards the end of the book. So yeah, but I am looking forward to book 7 to see what's happening in America, because this series of novels really takes us all over the world to see every possible aspect of how dragons were utilised in the 19th century all over the world. So we've seen France, we've seen England, we've seen a bit of Prussia, we've seen Africa, we've seen China, we've seen Australia, and now we're going to go to America. So very, very looking forward to that. So that's it from me for this video. That was Tongues of Serpents by Naomi Novik, the 6th book in the Temeraire series, which I'm getting almost got to the end of now. There are 3 books left, and that'll be it. And I really want to find out what happens at the end, but at the same time, I don't want this series to end. I've been getting such a buzz out of it. It's been so great. So yeah, that was book 6. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please leave me a comment, please leave me a like, and do subscribe to my channel. It means a lot to me. I really, really enjoy doing this. And thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye bye.